But I think this is what's been causing the problem. I mean, this is the third issue this year. Conspiracy theory. I give you conspiracy theory. This is my newsletter. I think it's got him scared. You know? I must have hit a nerve with one of those articles in there. Otherwise, they're pretty pissed off about something, and that's...
The space shuttle seismic secret? The Oliver Stone-George Bush connection? Oliver Stone?
Oh, yeah. Sure. I mean, he's their spokesman. Yeah. I mean, you think if anyone had the information that he's got and had a national podium to shout it from, that they'd actually let him do it? No, it's quite clear that he's a disinformation junkie for him. The fact that he's still alive says it all. I mean, he probably should be dead, but he's not.
Can you prove any of this?
No, absolutely not. A good conspiracy is an unprovable one. If you can prove it, I mean, they must have screwed up somewhere along the line, and then, if that's the case, well...
They?
They, yeah.
They who?
They, well, they... I don't know. That's why they call them they, and them, you know.
And where does Jonas fit in?
Oh, he's one of they. He's one of them. He's them. I mean, for sure. I mean, I know.
They, them.
Them.
Conspiracy theories. These days, they seem to be interwoven into society. Hardly a day goes by where there isn't some mention of a shadowy government entity plotting to steal everyone's freedoms. There has never been a time like this in the history of humanity. Technology has made instant communication possible, and when such speed of thought is enabled, ideas spread like wildfire. Now, let me be clear concerning the state of government. At this time, it is God's full intention for government to be cruel, dysfunctional, and unjust. Right now, He is displaying the futility of mankind. Without the benevolent, guiding hand of God, even the seemingly greatest forms of government fall into ruin and decay. Only under the rule of Christ will there ever be real peace and justice. That time has not yet arrived. It isn't very far off, though. Yet, in the meantime, we are exhorted to be subject to the superior authorities. God Himself it is that lifts leaders up and puts them down according to the counsel of His will. If we look at Paul's letters to the Thessalonians, we see a glimpse of the beginnings of those days when Christ takes hold of the scepter of global rule. We also see in those letters the great deception which precedes it. The deception is what will be our focus, and also how the conspiracy movement will aid in strengthening it. What is not out of faith is sin. Seeking to establish a righteous rule before the proper time, apart from Christ, is not of faith. People are capable of tremendous evil behind the veil of supposed righteousness, just like the Pharisees. Not actual righteousness, but rather self-righteousness. This is what the conspiracy environment is ushering in, self-righteousness. As I said, governments are currently unjust. This, however, gives no justification to usurp them in order to project a misguided idea of a righteous system. Believers are exhorted to live a mild and quiet life. This is rest in the assurance that God is in control, regardless of how bad things look. He is the one that is responsible for handling evil. He is the only one that can use evil for the good of all. Too many people see the end times like a Lord of the Rings novel, where there's an obvious nemesis bent on subjugating his enemies through terror and brute strength. They imagine that everything that looks good must be inherently good. This is a mistake. Hopefully, we can expose these things in due time. Now, having said that, I think it would be prudent to see the rise of the conspiracy movement. The timing is quite remarkable, as it coincides with other pertinent topics which will be discussed in other videos. We know that Satan operates through pride, as we have seen in the first lie that he told, "You shall be as God." Where can we place our finger on the line of history and find our starting point for the unveiling of this era of self? You don't have to go far to see it. We need only take a few steps back through the decades to see the foundation that has been laid for the greatest mental heist that will ever be perpetuated.
Thought crime is death. Thought crime does not entail death. Thought crime is death. I have committed, even before setting pen to paper, the essential crime that contains all others in itself.
Many hours of my free time encouraging my agents to deface party posters and hoarding announcements. I read and memorized Goldstein's book. For 30 years, I have plotted to bring down the party. I was sick in mind and body. Together with my colleagues, Aronson and Rutherford, I did counterfeit important party documents, including ex-London permits and travel passes, and that by use of these documents, my agents traveled freely throughout Airstrip 1, encouraging insurrection and organizing a massive counterplot to destroy the innermost faction of the Oceanian leadership. Furthermore, I used my position of privilege within the inner party to pervert and betray the truth at all times and to suggest wherever possible that our traditional allies in East Asia were in fact our dead enemies.
April the 4th, 1984,
In my position as chief factory planner,
I think.
I stole military plans and at vast financial profit sold them to the Eurasian leadership.
To the past,
I was
or to the future,
the attempt to subvert,
to an age when thought is free,
and so I became open
from the age of Big Brother, from the age of the thought police,
to his direction. I assassinated a number
from a dead man.
of organizing
Greetings.
1984, a novel that describes a dystopian world where the everyday average Joe is the victim of the powers that be. These malevolent, merciless powers rule the common people with an iron fist to keep them blind to the truth. This is a book that left us with memorable phrases like Big Brother and Orwellian, besides newspeak, terms that are used as synonyms for bad, tyrannical governments today. Even though it's not the first of its kind, it certainly made the biggest impression on society. You see, before the 1940s, there was only a limited idea of a totalitarian state. There were books like Brave New World by Aldous Huxley and The Iron Heel by Jack London, as well as public discussion on the subject, but nothing that reached the stature and refinement of George Orwell's 1984. Orwell took an idea which had been growing since the 1920s and made it famous through relatable characters. The focus of 1984 is not on the concept of authoritarianism, but on the resistance of the protagonist, Winston Smith. This may be why it gained widespread traction with the public. It was a story of resistance to tyranny with a view towards liberty. It was a tale of fighting back against powers of darkness. Winston Smith questions his surroundings despite the watchful eye of the party. He desires to be free of the confines of the thought police in Big Brother. He is intrigued by Emmanuel Goldstein, the mysterious leader of the counter-revolutionary organization called the Brotherhood. This protagonist seeks an escape from his prison, a path that leads away from the oppression of the authorities. The theme of the book certainly parallels that of Gnostic belief. Instead of the Demiurge, we have government. Instead of archons, we have officials of government. Just like Neo in The Matrix, we have a protagonist that desires freedom from government agents. Now, let me be perfectly clear. George Orwell was not influenced by Gnostic philosophy. His book was more of a product of the times and also of his own personal experiences during the Spanish Civil War. World War II had just ended and the Cold War was ramping up. Public distrust in leaders was growing, so it would make sense for a writer to play off of real-world issues in order to gain traction and make their name known. What I want to point out, though, is the odd timing of 1984. It was published in 1949, just 4 years after the defeat of Adolf Hitler. I think a visual representation of the things that happened from the end of 1945 to the publishing of George Orwell's novel would be most helpful in showing the oddity and parallelism of the events. Please remember that the phrases associated with 1984, like Big Brother, are used heavily by the conspiracy community today. The book tells a story that very much parallels Gnostic thought. Keep these in mind while we go over a little history. Okay, let's take a look.
Today, we are diving into the 1940s to explore a really wild historical parallel. Get this, at the exact same moment in time, two incredible stories were unfolding. One was about digging up a past that had been deliberately buried, and the other was about imagining a future where the past is systematically erased. It's a tale of two truths, and it gets right to the heart of our battle for history.
All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll set the scene with our tale of two truths. Then, we'll look at a hidden past being unearthed in the desert. After that, we'll jump to an erased future being dreamed up on a remote island. We'll bring it all together in the battle for history. And finally, we'll ask what it all means for us today with our modern memory holes.
So, first up, a tale of two truths. What on earth could a real-life discovery in the Egyptian desert possibly have in common with one of the most famous dystopian novels ever written? Well, the answer is the 1940s, and a major clash over the very idea of history itself.
I want you to just picture the mid-1940s for a second. The world is just starting to breathe after a devastating global war. New superpowers are emerging, big new ideologies are clashing, and the very concept of truth feels like it's up for grabs. It's in this exact chaotic moment that these two powerful narratives about the past start pulling in completely opposite directions. And this is the central question, right? What if, at the very same time, one group of people was literally digging up a history that was buried on purpose centuries ago, while one man was imagining a dark future where history is erased on an industrial scale every single day? Well, that's not a what if, that's exactly what happened.
So let's jump into our first story. Section 2, Digging Up a Hidden Past. This is the incredible and totally accidental discovery of the Nag Hammadi Library.
Our story kicks off in late 1945. A local farmer in Egypt makes a find that would totally reshape how we understand early Christianity. But look at this timeline. It wasn't simple. It took years before scholars even really knew what he'd found, and a full 30 years before the entire collection was finally safe and sound back in Cairo. The story of the discovery itself is just wild. This farmer, Muhammad al-Saman, hits a huge sealed jar. At first, he's actually scared to open it. He's worried there's a jinn or a spirit inside. When he finally cracks it open, he finds these 13 ancient leather-bound books. And then, in a detail that makes any historian's skin crawl, his mother apparently used some of the pages to light the oven. The rest of the text were just sold off, bit by bit, on the black market. It was this chaotic, messy, almost accidental return of lost knowledge.
So why were these books even buried in the first place? Well, scholars are pretty sure they were hidden on purpose. See, these were Gnostic texts, including the only complete copy of the Gospel of Thomas, and they told a very different story about early Christianity. They were probably buried way back in the 4th century, right after a powerful bishop banned any books that weren't in the official church canon. This wasn't an accident. This was a deliberate act of erasure, an attempt to create one single official history by literally burying the alternatives.
Now, I want you to hold that thought, the deliberate burying of history. Because at the very same time scholars were starting to piece these ancient texts back together, a writer on a remote Scottish island was imagining the complete opposite, an entire government built on the industrial-scale destruction of history. And that brings us to Section 3, Imagining an Erased Future, with George Orwell and his masterpiece 1984.
I mean, just look at the dates. Between 1946 and 1948, while those ancient papyrus texts were slowly surfacing in Cairo, George Orwell was cooped up on this isolated Scottish island. He was incredibly sick with tuberculosis, and he basically poured what was left of his life into writing one final terrifying warning about a future where truth is totally controlled.
So how do you control the truth? Well, in Orwell's world, you start by attacking language itself. The party creates Newspeak, the stripped-down version of English designed to get rid of any words for things like freedom, rebellion, or critical thought. The ultimate goal? To make thought crime, just thinking a rebellious thought, literally impossible, because the words you'd need to form that thought just don't exist anymore.
Then you've got the psychological tool needed to make this all work: doublethink. It's this mental gymnastics that lets you hold two completely contradictory ideas in your head at the same time and believe both of them. It's knowing something is a lie while also accepting it as the absolute truth. It's how the party makes its constantly changing reality the only reality. And here's the physical part, the actual machine that does the erasing. It's called the memory hole. It's basically a chute that leads to a giant furnace. Any newspaper, any photograph, any document that contradicts what the party is saying today gets dropped down the memory hole and incinerated. It is the perfect, chilling, exact opposite of a farmer in Egypt pulling a sealed jar of documents out of the earth.
And it all comes down to the party's famous, terrifying slogan: who controls the past, controls the future. Who controls the present, controls the past. By constantly rewriting history, the party makes itself perfect, infallible. Its power is absolute because there's literally no record left anywhere to prove it was ever wrong.
Okay, so let's put these two 1940s narratives side by side. Section 4, the battle for history, unearthing versus erasing.
You can see the parallels so clearly here. The Nag Hammadi discovery was all about recovery and discovery. The goal was to understand a lost past, and the outcome was an expanded history, a more complex one. Orwell's novel was about erasure and falsification. The goal was to control the present, and the outcome was a single, changing history. One is about history literally bubbling up from the earth. The other is about it being shoved down a memory hole. It's the ultimate conflict between complexity and control.
So what? A strange parallel from over 80 years ago. What does any of this have to do with us today? Well, that brings us to our final section, our modern memory holes, and why all of this still matters, maybe now more than ever.
So, why should we care? Why does this matter now? Because that fundamental battle from the 1940s, the battle between unearthing the past and erasing it, is still being fought every single day right here in our digital world.
I mean, just think about it. That same tension between uncovering and erasing is happening all around us, but at the speed of light. Online articles can be edited or deleted, with past versions vanishing forever. We're flooded with disinformation and so-called alternative facts. Entire digital archives can be wiped out in an instant. And now we've got deepfakes that challenge our very sense of reality. The battle Orwell wrote about, and the one those ancient monks fought by burying their books, is absolutely central to our lives today.
And that leads me to one final question for you to think about. We were promised that the internet would be this incredible archive, a permanent library for all of humanity. But in an age where information can be altered, deleted, or algorithmically hidden with a single click, are we really preserving history? Or have we just invented a much more efficient memory hole?
Such a fascinating correlation. It almost seems orchestrated, doesn't it? A text that was lost for more than a millennium is unearthed just as the groundwork for the conspiracy movement is being put into place. Now, George Orwell had no idea that his work of fiction would be so important to the internet and social media, specifically the conspiracy topic. How could he? They didn't exist. Also, how could he be aware of a Gnostic theme that had been buried? I am going to go out on a limb here and propose my own conspiracy theory. My theory is that Satan has conspired to delude the hearts of humanity. Now, this in itself doesn't sound like much of a revelation, but please hear me out. I believe that Satan has planned the greatest conspiracy of all time. You've actually heard of it before, even though you may be wondering what I am talking about. It's called the secret of lawlessness. Paul mentions it in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, beginning at verse 7. Here it says, "For the secret of lawlessness is already operating. Only when the present detainer may be coming to be out of the midst, then will be unveiled the lawless one." The lawless one is the Antichrist. The secret of lawlessness is how Satan appears as an angel of light, as is said in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 14. You see, the lawlessness of the end times isn't some obvious Orwellian state. Anyone with a heart knows cruelty is wrong and feels disgusted by it. Satan is currently running the world and its governments, therefore they are cruel and inept. These things aren't secrets. They are in our faces every day. No, the secret of true lawlessness is lawlessness masquerading as righteousness. This is what is at the heart of Gnostic teaching. They believe that the serpent in the Garden of Eden was the righteous one. They see themselves as victims of a cruel, unworthy, vindictive deity. There is no sense of guilt for wrongdoing. But in order to create this environment of self and victimhood, otherwise known as lawlessness, Satan needs a common enemy to set up as the ultimate adversary to all of humanity. He needs a group of people to blame as a whole, so that when the time comes for his sleight of hand, most of the earth will fall into the false light of the serpent, while simultaneously claiming to serve God. Who are these people that will be used as the ultimate scapegoat for the most hideous display of self-righteousness in human history? Well, we were talking about the 1940s, were we not? Was there perhaps another remarkable event that may have happened at the same time as the discovery of the Gnostic texts and the writing of 1984? Was there something that could be deeply associated with them, right in our eyes, so we can see a sinister conspiracy unfolding?
זוהי זכותו הטבעית של העם היהודי להיות ככל עם ועם עומד ברשות עצמו במדינתו הריבונית אשר תפתח לרווחה את שערי המולדת לכל יהודי ותעניק לעם היהודי מעמד של אומה שוות זכויות בתוך העמים. לפיכך נתכנסנו אנו חברי מועצת העם, נציגי היישוב העברי והתנועה הציונית, ביום סיום המנדט הבריטי על ארץ ישראל. ותוקף זכותנו הטבעית וההיסטורית, ועל יסוד החלטת עצרת האומות המאוחדות, אנו מכריזים בזאת על הקמת מדינה יהודית בארץ ישראל, היא מדינת ישראל.